Women who had excess body fat over the period of 13 years had a threefold increase in the risk of developing breast cancer.
The drinkers basically drank their breakfast, lunch, afternoon. At the end of 8 weeks, drinkers lost 2 pounds, and they also shrank their waist circumference by almost an inch.
Excess visceral fat, inflammatory fat, is so dangerous and linked to cancer. And by the way, not just breast cancer. It turns out that excess visceral fat has been linked to increased risk of 14 other cancers. Everything from
one of the first places you gain when you start gaining weight, 90% of people think it's around the belly, and understandably, because that's what you would see. I'm gaining weight, you look in the mirror, I'm seeing around your belly, but actually that's not so. Turns out that the first place you start building body fat is in your
we can actually activate our brown fat. Cold bath will do it. Sleeping in cold, cooler rooms will actually start to activate it as well. When that, by the way, when those mitochondria fire up, they're burning energy. You know where they draw that energy from? From your white fat, from your visceral fat first. So you want brown fat, good fat to burn down bad fat, visceral fat, white fat. You want to sleep in a cool room, or you want to go into a cold bath. And there are lots of foods that will also, you can eat foods to activate your brown fat to burn down harmful fat.
Waist circumference is a good surrogate of the amount of harmful body fat you have inside you, because the visceral fat is a dangerous fat. The subcutaneous fat is either beautiful or could make you not be so happy with your body shape, all right? But the visceral fat, which you can't see, is actually inside the cavity of your body. So when it's like peanuts you would pack into a FedEx container, you're shipping light bulbs. You can pack a lot of peanuts in a thin box and tape it shut. The box still looks thin, but it could be bursting with pressure on the inside. And basically visceral fat is something that whether you've got a big body or a small body, whether you're obviously overweight or whether you're skinny as a stick, you can still have too much body fat. By the way, here's an interesting little factoid. Do you know where's one of the first places you gain visceral fat, extra body fat, when you start gaining weight? 90% of people think it's around the belly, and understandably, because that's what you would see. I'm gaining weight, you look in the mirror, I'm seeing it around your belly, but actually that's not so. Turns out that the first place you start building body fat, especially the visceral fat, is in your tongue. Your tongue can get fat. So if you take a look at the anatomy of the tongue, the tip of the tongue is the Cirque du Soleil acrobat. It's capable of doing all kinds of crazy acrobatics. The middle of your tongue is muscular. It is buff and full of muscle to be able to move food around your mouth. The back third of the tongue is normally marbled like a ribeye steak with fat. Okay? And a lot of people don't realize this, but when you start gaining extra fat, one of the first places that it starts to grow where it matters, the visceral fat grows in your tongue. You get more marbling in the back of your tongue.
Wow.
Now, this happens even in skinny people. And in fact, it was studied in Sweden. Young women, women who are middle-aged or younger, who are thin, actually, when they started to gain weight and they started to gain visceral fat, they found it was in their tongue. They started snoring. Their bed partners would say, wait a minute, you started snoring. Now, why? Because when you're sleeping, you're relaxed. And when you're relaxed, your tongue's relaxed. Your fat tongue is relaxed. It blocks your airways. And guess what? You have sleep apnea. And so even thin people who have a lot of visceral fat, it's not just the diameter of the airway. You know, we used to think it's like the tunnel getting narrower, but even your tongue can gain weight. So these are some of these really interesting facts about body fat that we never really even thought about.
And this was a study done by Cornell in New York, looking at Swedish women who were normal body size or skinny. So you've heard of skinny fat. This is what they were studying. And they looked at these women to see, they did DEXA scans, as you described, to see how much body fat they had. And then they followed them over 13 years. And they actually found that women who did not have extra body fat had, normal risk of breast cancer, but women who had skinny fat, remember all the women in the study, and so 3,000 women, actually were normal body size, not I mean, they weren't supermodels, but they were just normal sized women. Some of them were slimmer than others, but none of them were obese. None of them were overweight, just normal size. But they knew at the baseline what the DEXA scan showed. And what they found is that women who had excess body fat over the period of 13 years had a threefold increase in the risk of developing breast cancer. And it's linked to higher inflammatory markers in their bloodstream, which makes total sense. The leaking body cream, the leaking inflammation, in a skinny tube, all right, or normal size tube, normal suitcase. Look, the suitcase can't expand bigger. It's got a finite size, but it's leaking out. And this is because cancer thrives in an inflammatory environment. If you have inflammation with even a microscopic cancer, like we talked about, but a small tumor, putting inflammation in the environment of a cancer is like pouring gasoline on the embers of a fire. You ever go camping, you have a campfire, it's almost out at the very end. Now, if you pour some gasoline in it, boom, whoosh, you're going to have to create a bonfire all over again. That's how dangerous inflammation is. So that's why excess visceral fat, inflammatory fat, is so dangerous and linked to cancer. And by the way, not just breast cancer. It turns out that excess visceral fat has been linked to 14 other cancers, increased risk of 14 other cancers, everything from colon, ovarian, lung, breast, prostate. It's a growing list of cancers that seem to be you would be at a higher risk if you had high levels of visceral fat. And it makes total sense given the inflammation.
There's this new discovery that the bioactives that are present, that Mother Nature has laced into our foods, can activate the healthy fat to reshape itself, not grow so big, redirect itself so we're creating more beneficial fat than harmful fat, and literally get rid of visceral fat. And as I dove into this deeper and deeper, the discoveries were getting more and more exciting to me, because not only was the lab research there identifying what these compounds are. They could be the catechins in tea. They could be the ellagic acid in strawberries and in chestnuts. They could actually be the sulforaphanes in brassica, the broccoli and bok choy and gailan, or turmeric. Or it could actually, their clinical studies were also being done to show that eating these foods specifically could actually shrink your waistline, your waist circumference, making your body tube a little bit smaller, because it is knocking down the visceral fat. Weight loss is sort of overall weight loss is sort of a side effect, as you pointed out, to actually right-sizing your body in ways that eating foods can actually generate. And so what I did, I spent about 2 years cataloging these foods. I spent about 10 years doing metabolism research, but 2 years really cataloging these foods. And I finally write about them again as if I were taking the reader into my grocery cart and pushing them around and telling them what to actually put into the cart from section to section in the grocery store. Cold temperature, and I'm sure you've talked about this, causes a shock to the body that releases epinephrine and norepinephrine, these hormones that actually are produced by our brains, and they course through our nerves, and they they trigger brown fat and really start the engine of the brown fat, literally like the clicker on your gas range on your oven before you boil some water, whoosh. All right. And so cold will actually do that. It turns out that one of the receptors is called the beta-3 adrenergic receptor. Beta-3 adrenergic receptor is a receptor for adrenaline, which is a shock hormone, a stress hormone, a fight or flight hormone. So brown fat actually lights up when you actually have a shock to your system, like a cold plunge. For those who want to do it, go for it, because that's actually how it works. It turns out that there's a bladder spasm medicine called mirabegron, because that also does the same thing, because the beta adrenergic receptor can actually be found on your bladder, all over your bladder as well. And in the bladder, it does something different than your brown fat. It actually helps your bladder contract, which you need to contract your bladder to pee. All right. But some people have a spasmodic bladder. It's contracting all the time. You get leakage and all this other unpleasant stuff. And so there have been medicines that have been discovered to actually hit the beta adrenergic receptor in your bladder to calm the bladder down. It hits the beta adrenergic receptor. Interestingly, researchers at the U.S. National Institutes of Health have studied that bladder medicine to see if they can target brown fat. And when they do, boom, it lights up the brown fat beautifully. And I show pictures of this. I've got permission from the researchers to show how this mechanism can light up brown fat. Now, I don't recommend anybody to use medicines to light up their brown fat because the doses of the medicines that were tested were way higher than you would normally use for bladder spasms. So don't do that. But that's a setup to say, well, what else can light up brown fat with the beta adrenergic receptor? Well, it turns out it's not just the beta adrenergic receptor, but once you click that, once you tip that switch, after that, the next dot that gets checked in this cascade is something called uncoupling protein 1, UCP1. And that trigger lives on the mitochondria, which is a little organ in your cells, especially in your brown fat, that is packed. Our brown fat is packed with mitochondria, these little sub-organs in our cells. The mitochondria is the fuel cell. I remember when I was in medical school and I had to memorize everything. I thought of it as mitochondria because it's small but mighty. It actually burns fuel, creates a lot of energy. It actually creates ATP, burns ATP to create energy. Well, it turns out mitochondria have a lot of iron in it naturally. Iron, when it's oxidized, is naturally brown. Lots of mitochondria, lots of iron, lots of oxidation. And guess what? That's why brown fat is brown. So for people wondering, why is brown fat brown? That's the reason. It's packed with this mitochondria that is actually a fuel cell. So anything that can activate the beta adrenergic receptor, anything that can actually turn on uncoupling protein 1, anything that can activate the mitochondria will turn on your space heater. And this is where foods actually come in, because beyond the cold, beyond the bladder spasm drugs, is a whole collection of foods: produce, dried, canned, jarred foods, seafoods, and beverages that can actually turn on one or more of these processes.
The tea drinkers basically drank their tea, sort of breakfast, lunch, and in the afternoon. At the end of 8 weeks, the tea drinkers lost 2 pounds, and they also shrank their waist circumference by almost an inch. And that means that visceral fat got burned down. Click, 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 whoosh. Green tea activates the brown fat. The brown fat burns down the fuel, burns away the fat. And guess what? Your waist circumference shrinks when you're losing excess body fat. This is the kind of thing that you can actually use to unpack your liver, unburden body fat in your liver. Now, in this study, the women who had green tea also had lower blood pressure. They had better fasting glucose. It's a sign of metabolic health. And they actually had better blood lipids as well, blood cholesterol. Now, these are all helpful signs that you're losing excess body fat and having a better metabolism. All right, this is going to be helpful if you want to, if you're battling with a fatty liver and you want to actually turn away from it. This is the kind of thing that you actually want to do, lose some excess body fat. Now, there was a similar study from Tehran University of Medical Sciences. They looked at 63 men and women. And these people, by the way, were between the ages of 35 and 65. So basically adults, okay, all the way up to, middle age. And they were overweight. And these people had type 2 diabetes. So they've had frank type 2 diabetes. And the study found that if you gave the people 4 cups of green tea per day over 2 months, okay, what happened is they lost 3 pounds of weight, okay, but they also lost almost 2 inches of their waist circumference. So they shrank like by 2 holes in their belt. Usually those belt holes are about 1 inch apart, right? So remember, the waist circumference is stretched by excess body fat and it shrinks. You get a tighter belt. Actually, if you shrink and lose your visceral fat. Turns out, if you are a tea lover, most people like green tea, but if you want to try other teas that are also effective, here's some good news for you. It turns out that you can improve your metabolism and burn down harmful body fat with matcha tea. That's the kind of bright green tea that you would actually get at a sushi bar, for example. And by the way, matcha is an exceptional tea because while green tea is like the tea leaves steeped, right? So you take the whole leaves, you put them in a bag, or you put a loose leaf, and all the good stuff, the polyphenols, the EGCGs dissolving out of the tea leaf into the water. With matcha, you take the entire leaf and ground it into a powder and stir that in. So you get the entire leaf. You get all the EGC, all the polyphenols, and you get all the dietary fiber as well. good for gut health, good for metabolic health, helps you burn fat. And so matcha is another tea that's been shown to be fat lowering. Oolong tea is another tea. All right. And if you know what oolong tea is, you're like, you probably nod your head and say, hey, that's my favorite. Now, oolong tea is a kind of tea that you will often get in a Chinese restaurant. It is not green, bright greens. It doesn't look grassy. It's got a little bit of an oxidized taste because it's slightly oxidized. It's not a black tea, not English breakfast tea, but it also still has EGCG, the catechin that actually helps you burn off extra body fat. Now, if you want to go dark, all right, English breakfast tea, Earl Grey, that's fine. But you really want to take it to the limit. There is a black tea called Pu'er tea, P-U''ERH, Pu'er tea. Pu'er is a small city in southwest China that originally developed this smoky fermented tea. It's a fermented tea, meaning it's got its own healthy bacteria growing in it. It's dry, all right, for a long period of time. And it was originally used in a trading route. So, these little bricks of fermented tea could travel long distances without spoiling. All right. Well, turns out researchers have found that Pu'er tea can actually shrink your waistline. It's got the EGCG, it's got the catechins, but it's also a probiotic tea that can also improve your metabolism.
If you really want to fight body fat and raise your metabolism, you don't want to fear your food. You want to actually lean into it to look for delicious, healthy foods eaten at a modest volume and also eaten at the right time. So it's not just, it's obviously what you eat is important and how you eat is important, but when you eat can also make a difference. It turns out that yes, oily fish are healthy because you get marine omega-3 fatty acids, but there was a study from Iceland that was quite surprising. They wanted to look at what the effect of omega-3 fatty acids were on body fat. And guess what? Turns on brown fat, helps you lose weight, burns away visceral fat so your waist size can shrink. And of course, they found it that eating salmon 3 times a week for 8 weeks will actually cause you to lose up to 15 pounds. All right. So that's a lot of weight. Yeah.
Wait.
Okay.
Wait. So you just said eating salmon a few
3
times a week can help you lose 15
over 8
pounds?
weeks. Yeah. So basically, now this is the study where they actually did a little bit of caloric restriction to get it started, then added salmon to see if eating salmon would actually trigger faster weight loss. So that's a pretty good amount of weight loss. Now, omega-3s are in salmon, right? It's an oily fish. In fact, I can tell you there's 1,565 milligrams of omega-3, marine omega-3 fatty acids in a 5-ounce serving of salmon. Okay. But here's what's crazy. And I think this is what opened my eye. The same researchers studied what they thought was going to be a non-oily fish like cod. Cod's not considered an oily fish. Cod only has 284 milligrams, not 1,500 of omega-3 fatty acids. Pretty low. Guess what they found? People that ate cod 3 times a week lost 10 pounds over 8 weeks.
Wow.
You don't have to eat mackerel and anchovies in order to get adequate omega-3s when it comes to your metabolism to fight fat. Something as low as cod with that amount of omega-3s will do it. So in my chapter, I convert in different seafoods that cod amount of omega-3s. You want 284 milligrams of omega-3s in a serving? Guess what that translates to medium-sized Gulf shrimp. Oh, you only need eat 4 Gulf shrimp to get as much you get in a serving of cod. How many oysters? You need to eat 8 oysters. You want mackerel, which is really oily? You only need 1 forkful of mackerel to get that amount as a cod. You don't even need that much mackerel. Halibut, which is, a very mild whitefish, right? Not oily. You only need to eat half a piece of halibut, half the size of a deck of cards in order to get the same amount of omega-3s as you get in cods. Remember I told you when you actually eat food, your insulin rises in order to draw that energy to load into your cells. Our metabolism is hardwired so that when you're eating and your insulin's going up, our metabolism stays focused on loading up on fuel and not burning it, okay? When we're not eating, our insulin goes down, our metabolism switches gears like switching train tracks and basically says, all right, it's time to burn some of that fat stored in cells. And maybe you're burning the fat from dinner. Maybe you're burning the fat from yesterday. Maybe you're burning the fat from the holidays. But that's actually when you're sleeping, you're actually able to burn. That's the way our metabolism is hardwired. So here's what I do. I try to give my body as much time to naturally burn fat as possible. If I'm sleeping 8 hours a day from 11 o'clock to 7 o'clock, for example, all right, here's what I do. When I eat dinner the night before, if I eat dinner at 7 o'clock and I put the dishes away at 8, I don't eat anything after dinner. I stop. I close my eating window at 8 o'clock. No midnight snacking, no noshing. I don't raid the fridge, no extra slice of pie before I go to bed. Now, guess what? I put the dishes away at 8 o'clock. I go to bed at 11. I've gained 3 extra hours of fat burning, metabolism, grooming. When I get up in the morning, I don't do what our moms told us to do, which is hurry up and eat breakfast and catch the school bus to go to school. I get up, I take a shower, I get dressed, I take my time, I go for a walk, or I'll check my email or do something else. I'll wait an extra hour before I eat breakfast. Okay? Now I've gained an extra hour. So the 8 hours of sleep plus the 3 hours the night before, 11 hours plus 1 extra hour in the morning, I have just spent half my day burning down extra fuel. Super easy. You want to go intense, you want to go 16 hours and squeeze it down to 8, go for it. But 12 hours works as well. I'm just trying to tell people easy, practical, delicious ways to do it. And then if you want to go hardcore, go for it.
The mirror and the scale doesn't tell you exactly what's going on because because weight, by the way, what you see, that number is your bones. You need good, strong bones. You want your bones to be heavy and solid. Muscle, you need to have muscle, especially as you get older. Aging is like one of these things where you want to have protein and you want to build muscle. Muscle weighs. Water, hydration. You want to have hydration as well. So all these compartments all contribute to the number on the scale. But what you want to really yoke in and control is actually visceral fat. Viscera is the term we use for gut. Gut fat, by the way, is not the stuff that you see in the mirror. It's not the love handles, the muffin top. It's not even really truly the beer belly. The visceral fat is the stuff that's inside the tube of your body. So you could have a skinny body and be loaded with this visceral fat inside. In fact, it's kind of like a styrofoam peanuts that you stuff a packing container with, like a FedEx box. You pack it in. You can have a lot of peanuts in there for a little package. And that's the dangerous stuff. So that's one of the things that you really want to be able to beat is your visceral fat. And then I think the other thing, another myth that, kind of like will help us jump right into the good news about all this is that the idea is that if you want to lose weight, you have to stop eating. You just have to eat. You just have to cut off food. And that's not entirely true either, because now the new research shows us there are certain foods you can eat that will burn down that harmful visceral fat. You can actually eat foods to burn fat, which is kind of a counterintuitive thing, but that's what the science shows. A simple way to make progress that anybody can do is to skip breakfast. I actually do that myself pretty often because of my schedule. But now think about it. You have just added, holy cow, you've just added another 4 hours to your 12 hours. So now you've gotten to 16 hours. Now you're into intermittent fasting in the formula way. And if you really want to actually kind of take it even further, if you can muscle it, if you want to kind of jumpstart your weight loss again, you know what? Have a little snack around lunchtime and don't eat anything. Don't eat any snacks in the afternoon. Wait till dinner. Compress your eating, into the smallest window possible. You will definitely lose weight, more weight over time. That triggers your body, your metabolism into burning down extra body fat. That's a way of actually, kind of startling your body, pushing it harder to be able to do it.
Hey, if you like that video, then you're going to love this one. Check it out.